So the BRICS nations are getting aggressively off the dollar. Global usage of the dollar is plummeting. And, this means that the U.S. empire, which is based on the globe using the U.S. dollar, is disintegrating. Without that, the income that comes from being the global bank, you lose a huge amount of cash that comes into the coffers of Washington. And, it's a Ponzi scheme. And the Ponzi scheme only works if there's people constantly who believe in the Ponzi scheme and who support the Ponzi scheme. Once people realize, oh my God, this is a Ponzi scheme, and they leave, the whole thing collapses rapidly, like at the end of any empire.
In a recent episode of the Jimmy Dore Show featuring Max Keiser, the discussion delved deeply into the decline of the American dollar, which Keiser described as one of the largest Ponzi schemes of the past 50 to 60 years. This bold assertion set the stage for a comparison between traditional financial systems and emerging digital currencies. Keiser highlighted El Salvador's pioneering move to adopt Bitcoin, contrasting its bold economic strategy with the more conservative approach of the United States. Currently, Bitcoin's price stands at $62,000, marking a 6.32% increase over the past week. As the global supply of Bitcoin tightens, countries like El Salvador are not only investing in the cryptocurrency but also integrating it into their economic frameworks, potentially setting a precedent for other nations. Keiser's insights delve into how El Salvador's ongoing commitment to Bitcoin could eventually position it as one of the wealthiest countries in the world due to its early and aggressive investment in cryptocurrency.
Stop. You don't have time. Don't miss out this 2025 bull run. Educate yourself first ahead of the crowd. We have created the ultimate step-by-step crypto cheat guide that will guide you this bull run. Unlock the secrets of crypto and make smarter investments today. Now by clicking on the link below to get your exclusive copy just under $10.
I think in America, when you see outcry about money being sent to Ukraine, for example, well, the government prints the money. I mean, and no one's going to stop them. They can print it and ship it to Ukraine. Now, what we're seeing now is that, of course, all that money ends up causing inflation, and then the inflation is bankrupting the middle class, and people are outraged, and they say, stop sending money to Ukraine. But to get more to the point, they should be protesting about getting rid of fiat money and adopting Bitcoin, as we do in El Salvador, and you too can enjoy the Salvadoran miracle. It's a circular Bitcoin economy. It's all in Bitcoin. I mean, you can just use Bitcoin your entire life in El Salvador if you want. The adoption rate is increasing every month, every year, but if you can do it now. So in Bitcoin Beach, my friend Mike Peterson of Bitcoin Beach, he started the Bitcoin revolution in El Zonte, El Salvador, and the circular economy in El Zonte by giving all the pupusa sellers and everybody in town some free Bitcoin. And they said, just transact in Bitcoin, because the surfers that were arriving in El Zonte, they had different currencies from different countries, and there was no way for the local business people to accept that foreign money. And they don't take credit cards, and they're unbanked. So these guys would have to go 20 miles down the road to an ATM and try to get cash, and it was very cumbersome. But on a Bitcoin standard, it doesn't matter where you come from, or any country, any currency. If you have a Bitcoin, you can transact because the local commercial people take Bitcoin, and it's an instantaneous transaction, and there's nobody who's going to stop them. You cannot interrupt or censor that. Freedom has moved from the U.S. to El Salvador. So this is what I'm telling people: leave the U.S. because it's sucking hind tit. The U.S. is now at the back of the queue. They're no longer the shining city on the hill. It's a fucking zoned out, fentanyl addicted, homeless person, on the parking lot dying from, whatever. That's like the U.S. is now the place to leave. It's a shithole. It's the banana republic. When the President Bukele gave his recent speech to CPAC, he was talking about inflation in the U.S. and how America is now monetizing their own debt. America prints money to buy its own debt because nobody else in the world wants to buy American debt. It's called debt monetization. And back 50 years ago, people in the U.S. would look at Central America and say, ha ha, you have to buy your own debt. You're a banana republic. And so here you have the president of El Salvador lecturing people in Washington at CPAC about the fact that you guys are now monetizing your own debt. So it's the U.S. has a monopoly on this, and the U.S. is world reserve currency since World War II. They kicked Iran off of SWIFT, and they sanctioned Russia and seized Russian assets. And so what your point is, they've weaponized the dollar, which is a terrible thing to do because these countries are then motivated to come up with something other than the dollar.
Which is what BRICS is.
That's exactly what they're doing. So the BRICS nations are getting aggressively off the dollar. Global usage of the dollar is plummeting. And, this means that the U.S. empire, which is based on the globe using the U.S. dollar, is disintegrating. Without that the income that comes from being the global bank, you lose a huge amount of cash that comes into the coffers of Washington. And, it's a Ponzi scheme. And the Ponzi scheme only works if there's people constantly who believe in the Ponzi scheme and who support the Ponzi scheme. Once people realize, oh my God, this is a Ponzi scheme, and they leave, the whole thing collapses rapidly, like at the end of any empire. And that's not the stage we're at now. The U.S. empire, the U.S. dollar empire, is the last inning of a massive Ponzi scheme that's been going on for 50, 60 years. And when it collapses, it'll happen like building number 7. It'll just be free falling in its own space. And everyone will wonder, how did that happen? It was so sudden. They'll make up some excuses, but it'll be quick and devastating. El Salvador is solving a big problem for America on the southern border. Their southern border is out of control. And they look at El Salvador and they notice that less and less Salvadorans are making the trip north. So they're actually loving President Bukele because he's helping them with a big problem that they have at the southern border. And they are now rooting for other countries to do the same, to follow in the Bukele model. And this would stem the number of migrants who are crossing the southern border. Number 2, to your point, it is a struggle. We are dealing with the IMF. So the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is, John Perkins wrote about this in his Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which he worked for the bankers and the IMF. And when a Southern American country or Central American country did something that the bankers on Wall Street didn't like, they would send in the economic hitman, and they would, in fact, throw them out of an airplane, the leader of that country, et cetera. And the history is replete with examples of this. It's not debated. This is exactly what they do and have been done. Today, we've got the IMF fulfilling that role. It's trying to get as many countries in the world to get on the U.S. dollar. Donald Trump said last week that he's going to go after countries that stop using the dollar. And so they're very nervous. They're very nervous about the fact that the dollar is losing world reserve currency. There's nothing they can do about it. But, with the IMF, President Bukele has pretty much gone toe-to-toe, let's say, with the IMF. And he's in the process now of exiting the IMF. So the economy is growing sufficiently without the IMF's help. Thank you very much. The balance sheet of the country, by the way, the balance sheet of El Salvador, the country has hundreds of millions of dollars, close to $1 billion in Bitcoin. They're putting Bitcoin on their reserves, which helps them grow outside of all this fiat money madness. So not only do they use it as day-to-day legal tender, but the country itself has put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. We have an adopting El Salvador passport program. People are sending us $1 million in donation to get a El Salvadoran passport within 2 weeks. And then that money goes into Bitcoin. We've got some other financial kind of architecting that's going on, which is favoring Bitcoin. So that not only is the country have Bitcoin as legal tender, but it'll become a fully reserved Bitcoin country, which means that it'll be potentially the richest country in the world because all these other countries are going to die into fiat money madness. They're all throwing this. Let me tell you, El Salvador is the next Singapore. And the GDP here is going to triple in the next, 5, 6, 7 years. This is the place to be, Jimmy. The U.S. is a fucking shithole. I mean, if you want to waste your time in that godforsaken hellhole, have at it. But if you want to be part of the revolution where people are optimistic and building the future and there's economic freedom and freedom of speech, there's only one country in the world, and that's El Salvador.
What do you think about the significant adoption of Bitcoin by El Salvador, as discussed in this interview? Could the United States benefit from adopting a leadership approach similar to El Salvador's to advance its own Bitcoin strategy? Share your opinions in the comments below. For more Daily Dose Crypto news, check out these 2 awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.